Hello and welcome to everyone to this session of the Kalinga Literary Festival. We are very happy to have Anand Nilkantan with us. In fact, and I'm thankful to KLF for giving me this opportunity once again to engage one of my favorite authors, Anand, in a conversation. And this is happening for the third time, all three times at KLF. The first time, of course, in a virtual medium, in an online medium. Now, the first, when Rashmi asked me to have this conversation with Anand yet again, and I shared it in the family WhatsApp group, guess what? I'm going to do this. My sister asked me, "Ab is baar kya puchoge? Bhabhi ji kaisi hai?" Haven't you exhausted all your questions already? But then, with Anand, you can never have enough. There is so much to ask him and so much that, one would like to listen from him that one can never have enough. And by the way, happy Book Lovers Day. I'm told today is Book Lovers Day, which is an informal day that started in the US, but then in India, we celebrate everything. And we're good at that. So a wonderful day to have. Yes, Anand?
No, thank you, Sujit. It's wonderful. Sorry, I didn't know about that, so I expressed surprise. That's all. I didn't know today's Book Lovers Day.
Yeah. So, yes. The last fortnight, of course, we have had two very momentous things happening in India. Of course, no, I'm not talking about COVID. I mean, nothing major has happened in the last 14 days, which has not happened earlier. Of course, the cases have been increasing. One of the momentous things that I'm talking about, I know Anand will not like this comparison, is the Bhumi Pujan of the Ram Mandir. The other has been the release of Chaturanga by Anand Nilkantan, which is a sequel to the prequel to the famous Bahubali films. That's how I would like to put it. So, yeah, I think we are having the book cover of Chaturanga there. And KLF will be sharing the book link on the Amazon link. I'm sure those of you who have not got this book already, what are you waiting for? I mean, that's the best way to engage yourself in the lockdown, to have one of the best things that you can possibly read, which is fresh off the oven, as they would say. So thank you, Anand, for being in this show. And congrats on Chaturanga. So tell us a little bit about what happens in this book. And also a little, when you talk about the book, of course, I'm intrigued, and I'm sure a lot of readers are also intrigued by your fascination with board games. You had Ajaya, the roll of dice, and now you have Chaturanga, which I believe was a precursor to Shatranj, chess. So board games, dice, chess as a metaphor for things that you want to talk about. So please tell us about Chaturanga, and we'll take it from there.
Thank you, Sujit. It's always wonderful. Kalinga Literature Festival has always been one of my favorite. I love coming there, but this time it is COVID, so we couldn't meet personally. I think for next 1 year, it is going to be all virtual literature festival. We are living in virtual times. Unfortunate, but we have to be good with what we have now. Coming back to your question, Chaturanga is a kind of chess, but not exactly chess, actually. It is more similar to Ludo. Ludo, where you roll the dice and then you move the coins accordingly. So why this was mandatory for most of the princes across India in the ancient pre-Islamic Indian subcontinent, across the country. The princes, you had to learn playing Chaturanga. So Chaturanga has two things. One is strategy. It's a strategy game with an element of luck. So you don't know how the dice will fall, and once the dice falls, then you'll have to play. But the opponent also gets a chance to play the dice. So it is about your fortune versus his fortune, plus your skill versus his skill, the opponent's skill. This is like anything in life, or this is like a war strategy. This could be a political strategy. This could be a corporate strategy. So this was typically taught to most of the princes because of this. It is the nearest thing which reflects life as a game. Because chess is pure skill. Element of luck is very minuscule in chess. Whereas if you play Snake and Ladder, it is totally luck. Many of the board games are totally luck, or they are totally skill based, totally logic based. Life doesn't work like that. No, life needs both. You need skill, you need luck also. The destiny also plays a role. So Chaturanga is all about that. You don't know from where things will come, what will happen. Sometimes you'll get a good hand, sometimes you'll get a bad hand. The modern parlance board game Monopoly might be an example of similar to Chaturanga. But so why I put the name as Chaturanga in this is because this is the mid part of the series. If I take it as the whole book, this is actually the mid part. Mid part, as you know, for any writer, it is a what he calls a quagmire. It's one of the toughest thing to write, the mid part. So this is the place where all the interesting twists and turns happen. More than action, it is setting up for the big climax in the third book. This is the core of the book. The first book is setting up the characters, then their journey starts, and the third book, which is coming by December or January, hopefully, I almost finished it and just I have to write only 10% of it. The 90% is over, and just waiting for how people are reacting, feedback, and all, and then write. So I just next month I'll start writing. Hopefully by December, January it might come. So this book, what we find is a woman's journey in the medieval India. So I have set it like 8th century, 9th century. Perhaps what we can think of, that is a golden age. Even though people say Gupta age is golden age, that is very Delhi or Gangetic plain centric view. For other parts of the country, for example, Odisha, for South, it's a 8th century, 9th century, 10th century, 11th century, 12th century is the peak when all these empires come. Chola Empire, all the Pallavas, all these empires come. Pallavas were slightly earlier, but Gajapatис, all these people come. No, that typical core area where the actual this thing happens. India, I'll come to that when we reach there. This is the time. So this is set in a period somewhat like that, 8th century, 9th century AD. In that period, if a woman wants to become the queen of Maheshwari, she is entering the most ruthless world of medieval politics. This is Chaturanga is all about that. Shivagami's journey to that, where different worldviews clash. There are unscrupulous people, ships. So trading, ships, ports. So when we tell India's history, also we rarely tell the coastal India's history, which is much more intriguing and much more fascinating than the landlocked India's history, if we really think. Because this is where the world expanded. No, the world came to India and India went out to world. So Chaturanga is all about that. There is another kingdom, a coastal kingdom. This is a landlocked country with a riverine thing. It's a clash of civilization. So this is all about that. It's the core of the book.
Okay, interesting. Yeah, I mean, of course, as an Odia, I can relate to a lot of what you're talking about. Given that period, that is when all these big temples were constructed.
All the big
everything.
temples.
Yeah,
Konark, Gangaikonda Jolapuram, so many. Anyone south and east. That was the core area when most what we identify with India, traditional India, everything was built at that period.
yeah.
That's
Also,
why.
like in Kalinga, since it's Kalinga Literary Festival, Kalinga's maritime relations with Indonesia, Southeast Asia,
Yes,
all of it happening at that time. That's right.
all of it happening.
Yeah. So Anand, since everyone is familiar with the characters of Bahubali and the stories, and also your earlier novel was The Rise of Shivagami. You talked about in terms of the larger picture, where what is happening in terms of the dynamics which is happening in this novel. But could you tell a little about the story also?
Then who will read the book?
So
see, now Shivagami is given a choice whether the king knows. King is playing her. The king doesn't remain in the throne without being an ace player of Chaturanga. He should gauge the other people's mind. That is true in this era also. If you are at the top politician, you need to gauge the others. You have to be noble, you have to be mean, you have to be ruthless, you have to be great. You have to be a lot of things. You cannot be just. You are not a saint. You are a ruler. So you have to be ruthless ruthless, cunning, sly as one part, and the other part generous, noble, having certain qualities. That is what makes a leader, a great leader. Not just being saintly. That is a separate. Saintly leaders are a separate thing. So here the Somadeva, who is an anti-hero, who has killed Shivagami's father, one of the anti-hero, he is giving a choice to her: either you kill either your foster father and come up in the political game, or you leave it at that and die with him. So it's a choice for her. From that moment onwards, it is her journey. She has to take a lots of tough choice. So from an innocent woman, a naive woman, she is slowly turning into, with only one intention, that I had to avenge for my father's death. From there, it changes to she is getting into more and more and more, and it is a conflict of a sort also in her mind, whether achieving her result, how much she can stray away from what has been thought as right and wrong, and what are the limits of rights and wrong, and what is right for one, is it right for another? So where do you draw the border? What is moral, what is immoral, what is good for one could be bad for some other people. So every day in any leadership position, the leaders will be having all these kind of choices to make. It's very dynamic. It keeps on changing. And you don't even know. Today you think this is the right thing to do. But after 50 years, people will judge and tell that, no, no, he had, with the benefit of hindsight, people will tell, no, no, this is, all these things was wrong. So it is her struggle through that journey. Along with that, naturally, what happens when a woman comes to the politics or in any other field, there is a conflict between her personal love and what he has set to achieve, what she has determined to set to achieve. So there is this conflict. Naturally, it comes. So it is always, if you see, for a man, the society thinks that okay, he has all the support. He has an ambition. I want to become so and so. He has an ambition. He just goes, and he expects that his partner or his lover or his wife will play a supportive role. Society also expects that. The same might not be true about the woman. So the history is full of such women who overcame this, sometimes by doing a lot of sacrifice in their personal life. Very few have managed to balance it. So this all goes into the mind of man, and every character in this, almost 40 characters are there. Everyone has to face their own devils, their own demons in their mind. So
Yeah,
who is
I
right?
think
Who is? Yeah,
I
please.
think very interesting points you raised about the subjectivity of truth and the the question of morality, the dilemma, something that we'll come back to. But my next question is actually something that interestingly you've answered, and because I was very curious to know, how exactly does one create a backstory to something as popular as the Bahubali films? Because the readers of your novels, uh, where you are writing about before the beginning of the Bahubali films. So how would actually, and then given the fact that it's a series of 3 novels, I was kind of trying to imagine how would Anand have done it. And then I thought, well, in a way, how the third novel ends, because it has to seamlessly flow into the beginning
Yeah.
of the films. In a way, where the first novel begins, because
Hmm.
you have a sense of where to develop it from. So could you tell a bit about the process of is it that you've created a kind of flow chart or a plot line? Was the third novel actually plotted out earlier before you started writing the first novel? How did you
I
end up
don't. I don't write
creating
like
the
that. I
backstory?
cannot. I cannot plot a thing. I plan a bit. Not that I just go there and blindly write whatever I can. That is not possible. But it is also not true that I knew where to begin. I didn't know where to begin. I didn't know where to begin it from.
Okay.
Because in the film or in the story Bible which Rajamouli sir and his father had created, there was nothing about the childhood of Shivagami or Kattappa. So that all were my creation actually.
Okay.
I only knew one image is there that Shivagami is the mother of both these Bhallar Dev and Bahubali. That is the only image. It has to reach there. The rest, everything I had to create. So what I did cleverly or foolishly perhaps was I didn't use much of the characters in the film because it would have been difficult. I just took these two characters plus Vijal Deva. So only three characters I took. The rest all I created a history, went back to history. So I did a lot of research on this period. I'm a history buff. I love reading about the history, especially Indian history. So all the elements of this I have used into this, and then I created a story world. How a medieval uh, city would have looked like in India. What were the problems there? So many things what you don't find in film also will come in the book because I had to fill this book has to fill 30 years of story at least and around 1500 1200 pages. Otherwise it will not be in this epic scale because it is meant to be a Netflix series also. So when that means around 50 hours of content. So 50 hours of content is something like almost 1200 pages. So my screenplay writing experience also was helpful in this. I have written more screenplay than books. Almost 500 hours of screenplay I have written. So that
CRK
also
Ram and all of that.
C.A.K. Ram, Chakravarti Ashoka, Mahabali Hanuman in Netflix, Sarfarosh, then few episodes of Adalat. I have written varied things more than books in the screenplay. But I like writing books. The screenplay I do it for money. Last time also I told that. But that experience was very helpful. So what I did was I first created characters. What I do is I create characters. I pick up characters. I make prototypes. Once I create characters, the characters lead me. My job is to create characters. So the first book I had written in around 59 days actually. 100 days I took, but the first 35 days I was just creating characters. I drew characters, I enacted characters. So these characters kept coming. So I took prototypes because actually, if you see, there are hardly 3 or 4 stories in the world. Every story is a mishmash of what all stories are there. How well you tell, that is important. There aren't lakhs of stories. It's a permutation combination of the various characters. So I drew from Mahabharata, I drew from a lot of Indian history. Are you there or have you left?
Yeah, yeah, I'm there. I'm there. Yeah,
Okay.
I'm there.
For a minute, I thought I'm just talking to myself. That's why.
Yeah.
So I created characters. So almost 40 characters I created. And then what I do is I kind of interview them. I try to walk with them. I try to talk to them. I try to walk with them. I try to get into their head. I try to think where they grew up, how they grew up. I will not use even 10% of it, what they tell to me. But then what happens is like a tapestry, it gets woven. It is like creating a garden. So first you create the seed and then it grows by itself. There are writers who write like, especially thrillers and all, you can only write like that perhaps, where you write like an civil building plan. You have an exact plan. First you plot it out, so it's an engineering plan. Then you exactly build like that. Here the window will come. Here this thing will come. Similarly, same way they write. That is here this villain will come and shoot. Here the sidekick will die. That's one way of writing. Certain books can be written only in that way. But the way I write, it is more like it's not like wilderness that I just go sit and write and if whatever comes I put. That is also a method of writing. A lot of classic writers have written that stream of consciousness writing and all those things. But like Ulysses is that it's totally I cannot even understand what it is. It's a very famous book, but I was never able to go over 50 pages, not even 50 pages. Why should I lie? Hardly 20 pages I could read. Many times I attempted. It's considered as a classic. So what I do is like it's like a garden. So garden, you know what seed? I know I am putting. Say it's a vegetable garden, so I know I put pumpkin seed. Pumpkin only is going to come. But how big a pumpkin will come, small pumpkin will come, big pumpkin will come, whether brinjal will be better than that pumpkin, all those things I don't know. But it's like cultivating a garden. So that's how I do.
In fact, it's very interesting you mentioned, about this metaphor of cultivating a garden when you talked about creating these stories. I'll tell you something I'm reminded of, and I would like to have your response to that. I'm actually reminded of Kipling's Jungle Books. Something that, again, a lot of readers are familiar with. What many people don't know is that Kipling actually started, the Jungle Books was written as a kind of backstory, very similarly. So he first wrote a story called In the Rook, Rook as in forest, which was in a separate volume. It is not published along with the Jungle Books. It was in a volume called Many Inventions, in which Mowgli has grown up and is a forest guard. So in a way, he's an ideal native subject. Okay. And that is why people have often speculated why Mowgli is not a white man, because he's seen as the white man dominating the jungle, which is seen as a metaphor of British imperialism. So why is Mowgli brown? But because Mowgli, the original Mowgli, which was in the Rook, is an Indian forest guard. And Mowgli then started out as a brown baby. Is first introduced as a brown baby. And over again 2 books in which the short stories again, where Mowgli develops. The interesting that happens is, like a garden again, so Kipling has planted a brown baby, but the brown baby actually grows up to be a colonialist. So if you read the last Mowgli story in the second Jungle Book, he's actually he's someone who's colonized the entire jungle. He's the complete master. But then the gap seems to be in the last Mowgli story, that how does he flow into the Mowgli in the Rook, where he's not the master, but he's a servant. And there are some discontinuities there. So I just wanted to know, so here is a classic example of the character going out of your hands. And
Characters always go out of the hand.
Story.
If character doesn't go out of the hand, what happens? Characters they acquire their own identity. So they are like any living people for a writer, and hopefully for the reader also, if writer is skillful enough. So that's why many well-written books, the character still stays with you even after so many years. Why does all the characters of Mahabharata still stay with you? Because it's so well crafted. So the character some of our writers were so great that they became gods, the characters they created. We can put it like that. Maybe a controversial things to say, but as a writer, I would consider it as the greatest compliment we can give to the genius of Valmiki and Vyasa, that the characters they created gave birth to a civilization itself. So characters go out of the hand is a given thing. If character doesn't go out of the hand, then there is something wrong with the writing, because character has not acquired life. Can you predict how your friend will react? You know somewhat how your friend will react. Maybe your closest friend also. But given a circumstances, you cannot control how he will react. So character becomes your friend. You can only have in this range, perhaps he might react. You can only speculate like that. Sometimes he or she might react in a totally different way. For an author, all these characters become friends. Sometimes they become the part of you. And then sometimes the danger is that you become the character many a times and you don't want to let it go. So writing is madness, writing is insanity. It's not easy to live with a writer also.
भाभी जी से पूछना पड़ेगा.
You got your chance to ask that question now.
No, but since I don't know if you would want to answer this question now, but since you've already written most of the last novel in this series, did you face any challenges? You may, of course, choose to answer it the next time we have a conversation after that book is out. But would you like to talk about it now? Did you have any challenges in trying to make it?
My challenge was, see, this book is about Shivagami and Kattappa. The problem I was facing was other characters were jostling for their own space. There are so many characters, there's 40 characters I created. Everybody wants to be in the book. That's the biggest problem when you face. To take it out. And these are all dangerous characters also. They are pirates, they are this thing and all. I don't want them to haunt me. Actually, what happens is they all deserve another book actually. if you really ask. But this, since it's a franchise, I don't know whether it will happen. But all these characters, that is how the stories grow, no? How did Mahabharata grow? I'm not comparing whatever I'm writing with a great work like Mahabharata, but I'm telling it as an example. Mahabharata, every character have their own story. So you can write an epic of every character of Mahabharata. You can write a novel. You can write anything out of it. You can write a play. So that is why in all Indian languages, it has come as so many great novels were written from each character of Mahabharata or Ramayana. Everyone becomes important. You feel that Mahabharata has not given space. You go into the mind of Karna and write it. So many on Karna. You go into the mind of Draupadi and write. So Yakshaseni, all these things, Ininyan or Angate, all these different languages, great books happen. You go into the mind of Bhim, then Gadha Yuddha of Pampa in Kannada or Rendamuram of Malayalam, M.T. Vasan Nair. Like this, it happened. Mrityunjaya happened. So many books happened. No? So this is what a great work of literature, well-crafted characters do it to you. So it could be like Eklavya comes for 2 minutes in Mahabharata. You can write an entire novel of it. If you take it as screen time, he comes in 3 minutes scene. But you can write him
maybe
with
like
edited.
maybe like Anand Nilkanthan wrote about the Vanaras who deserved another novel. Similarly,
Yeah.
someone may actually write
Right
about the
about it.
characters.
Even in my Ajaya, I had Ajaya is a 1,200-page book. My 2 books put together. In Ajaya, I had given around 200 pages to Eklavya. So that is a novel in itself I wrote. See, Ajaya is around 4 or 5 novels combined together. It's a big.
Yeah.
I wrote it like my magnum opus or something. No, 1,200 pages, 2 books put together. All of Dice and Rise of Kali. So in that Eklavya, Ashwatthama, I thought these are all separate novels. If I had enough business sense, I should have written as separate novels and earned more money on that. But I thought, no, I will write like this.
Okay. So, but it's interesting. You talk about epic. You talk about history. Rajamouli seems to prefer the word epic for Bahubali, but you use the term historical fiction for your writings. And what is also interesting is like when you were now describing, each of the characters wanting their own space. It sounded like like different actors are there auditioning for the main role, and everyone wants a main role. It sounds like that. And interestingly, your novel also has a dramatis personae at the beginning. So could you talk a little bit about this? Of course, you mentioned this, and I would want you to elaborate on this because I was curious. I think a lot of readers are curious to know, how do you see your work as a historical fiction and not an epic? Epic versus historical fiction.
See, in India, I think we should not go by the Western definition of epic or what do you call historical fiction or everything. For us, everything is Purana. Even what happened to Rani Lakshmibai is Purana for us. If you really see, that is, they are all what you call. They are what happened to Bakshi Jagabandhu is a Purana. If you really see. You may call it, but a lot of myth like Jagbandhu's, he lifting the rock for scratching his back. Hardly 180 years old, 200 years old.
Yeah.
No, 180 years old, 180 or 200 years old. That's what. So when was it? 1827 he died. So
Yeah.
Somewhat around that. So Bakshi Jagabandhu became a myth. It's more than a history. It's not even myth. It's like Purana. You don't call it a myth. Myth is something not true. But this grows in this kind of things grows here. It is not if it is a typical historical fiction, you will talk about this and this so dry. So and so date he fought. And just taking, since we are talking about Kalinga, I took an example from there. So and so date he fought. So and so people will forget it. But when you tell this like this was where Jagbandhu stood and did this. He scratched his back and the rock moved. You are creating an image in that. It's historical novel. If I am writing a Jagbandhu as a historical novel, I will put this because with that you have defined his character. Yes, you have defined his strength. He has defined a lot of things. This is how Indians tell the story. So that is why I don't go by the Western or English definition, because I I think in Malayalam and write in English. I am not a native English speaker. I learned English very late. I learned English. First English book I read, apart from whatever they teach in the school, first English book I read at the age of 16 or 17. So I'm
And
not
which was
somebody
that?
who I had a Malayalam translation and I had a English translation so that I will understand English one. That was Dominic Lapierre and Larry Collins' Freedom at Midnight.
Okay.
That was the first original. I have read most of the English classics in Malayalam when I was studying. Library used to have everything I read in Malayalam. Lot of Indian classics also, other Indian languages, classical languages, classics I read in Malayalam. So I read in Malayalam. So I don't have the sensitivity of a metro-born, highly what you call sophisticated or whatever you call kind of vibe for me, because I don't talk in Malayalam. I mean, I don't talk in English. I don't talk to my family in English. I don't talk to my friends in English. I use Indian languages. Couple of them I know, three, four of them I know. So whatever, whenever possible, I use that. I don't. I'm not the one who thinks in English, and I think I should not follow the English style of storytelling, and I will not fall into their definition that this is epic, this is mythology, this is history. For us, everything is a story. And if I am telling an Indian story, that's why I took the example of Jagabandhu.
Very interesting. Interesting perspective, because these questions often come up, and it's interesting the way you explain, how you look at these different forms. Of course, a little digression. Are you
Yeah.
writing a book on Bakshi Jagabandhu?
I had actually not a book actually. I was because of COVID it got delayed. We were writing something for a big TV series. So I was doing my research. That's why I'm able to tell all
Oh,
this.
nice, nice, nice. We are all looking forward to it. Wow, wonderful. I think that's the best news
But I don't
today.
know when it will come because of the this thing. We don't know when it will come. It got delayed because of the COVID. But I had written about Rajguru and Jagbandhu and
Oh,
all,
nice, nice, nice. Right. Great.
Kurda and
Look
all. So
forward to it.
whenever I come to Orissa, I do all this research also. I roam around there.
Ah, good that Kalinga KLF has been bringing you often. That is allowing you opportunity to do more and more research. So good. I wanted to, you talked about taking inspiration from the Mahabharata. And in
Hmm.
fact, even before I read Rise of Shibagami, when I looked at the films for the first time, I thought it seems to be very Mahabharata like. There are these brothers. There's one representing, uh, that supposedly the victory of good over evil, that kind of a thing. Bijaldev reminded me of Dhritarashtra, that kind of those parallels were
Hmm.
coming in. And knowing you from your earlier books, like Asura was the story of Ravana, right? And then Ajaya was the story of the Kauravas. So, and I remember in, I think, one of our earlier conversations, I used that quote from the beginning of the movie Braveheart, which starts with history is written by those who hang the heroes, which is something that, you were trying to do, write about the real heroes. So I would imagine, that probably Anand will write about Bhallal Dev, who seems to be the much maligned monster. You know, Anand would write about the Talakayas, who are maligned. So how do you because that is the idea, of Anand that we got from your first few novels. So how do you reconcile that, uh, image of Anand who is bringing up the voice of the vanquished, because Asura's subtitle was that also the vanquished, who's bringing in the voice of the vanquished with here Anand who is writing the story of the empire, Mahismati. So how would
Uh,
you?
Rajamouli sir had read Asura and then he had invited me to be the part of this team. But he gave me this job on one condition that I will not make Vijaladeva or Banal Deva the hero. So my hands were
So he told you clearly. He told you
tied.
clearly. Don't
He
do
told
that.
me that's the only condition he made. Other than that, he didn't put any condition. Rest he gave me a free hand. So that gives you the answer. Still, what I have done, what I have sneaked through is I created my own characters, gray characters. because films will work. It works beautifully. That's why that's such a beautiful screenplay for Bahubali. Film, it works where you clearly have a good side and a bad side. But when you write a
Black
novel,
and white. Black and white.
black when you write a novel, it is always better to stay in the gray, where hero is good but not as good as you think, villain is bad but not as bad as you think. Why? It makes a character interesting. They all have a backstory. Why Patraya in this behaves like that is because he has a backstory to it. Why the most worst of villains behave the way they have a backstory. This you can do only in TV series and their modern, sorry, only in novels and their modern equivalent web series, not TV series. TV series are very plain, they don't have any layers. It has to be good versus evil only. But if you see OTT platforms, what they bring out, good series like Breaking Bad or this Queen is more elegant,
House of
like
Cards.
House of Cards, Lost Kingdom, all these things. When if you see, it's all a play of hero who is good but not good enough, and villain who is bad but not bad enough. So no, because these are the OTT platform web series are the modern equivalent of novels. It's a visual equivalent of novels.
Interesting. Yeah.
So since this was a novel and this was going to be or this is rather becoming a OTT series, a web series for Netflix, this kind of characterization was required. But already this what you call these characters are set in people's mind because of this successful film. So that was one reason I created my own characters instead of just writing before the film happened. An easy way would have been tell the Bahubali story before this with the same characters, like what Devasena did in her childhood. So I didn't touch all those characters at all. I just created another world, story world. Otherwise, my hands were tied.
And you chose the character of Sivagami also because it was
She's
fascinating to
great.
look at a woman in that period.
Not only that, she look at her in the film itself. When Rajamouli sir asked me, I told that I will take only these two from this because they are so fascinating. One is Shivagami, who orders the death of her son or her foster son whom she loved. So that is a quality. I won't say quality. What do you call that? Is the nature of a true ruthless medieval leader. You can see in Mughals also, so a lot of them blinded their brothers, killed their sons, imprisoned their fathers. So this kept happening. So here is this girl, and here is this lady, and then this slave who was willing to thrust his sword into almost a son like uh, Bahubali,
Yeah.
that is Katapa. So these two characters only I took because Bahubali, both the Bahubalis are so good that I cannot put them in novel. That much goodness makes it a problem to write actually in a novel. Visually you can sustain because the hero's charm is there, hero's fans are there. Then you create this thing. That's a different kind of storytelling, and it's a fascinating way it was done. But when you write in the book, when you write now, after 2 minutes you start getting bored. Why do you think it's very difficult to read Ramayana? You can see Ramayana. Try reading Ramayana. It becomes very boring. Mahabharata, it never happens. Mahabharata is so fascinating because Krishna is so in the gray zone, whereas Rama is straight jacket. In visually, you can envisage it. Here is a great man who doesn't stray away from that. You try reading it. So that is why they forced you to read Ramayana, and they never allowed you to read Mahabharata at home. Mahabharata, nobody is good. No, even nobody is good or nobody is bad. In Ramayana, everybody is good. That's a problem with Ramayana. Even villain is good. Conventional Ramayana, not my Ramayana. Conventional Ramayana.
Yeah.
Even the villain is so good. Villain's brother is good. Kumbhakarna is good. Villain's son is good. Hero is good. Hero's brother is good. Hero's servant Hanuman is good. One they kill Bali, he is good. There is nobody bad in Ramayana. Everybody is good, including Ravan. They have some faults. Mahabharata goes to other extreme. Everyone is bad. Even the god does everything. It is all his leela. You can call whatever it is, but not a single warrior is killed in a fair manner in Kaurava side. So the so-called evil side, so-called the good side uses all tricks and many things, all tricks in the book and many things which is not in the books, hitting below the belt, everything, and they are called goods. It's such a fascinating characterization what Vyasa had done. So Mahabharata reading is very fascinating. So that might be the reason why ancestors told don't read Mahabharata. You will get spoiled. At least in the south, that belief was there. You don't read Mahabharata at home. You don't even keep Mahabharata at home. And you keep only Ramayana.
Interesting, very interesting. In fact, also very interesting the way you shared that the modern web series is a kind of, is a movement from the novel. The novel becoming, reinventing itself as a web series. It's a very interesting perspective. I would like to take this further about, again, something that we discussed, House of Cards. When I went through Chaturanga, I thought, the intrigues that you're talking about, the political intrigues, I actually related with the House of Cards. And I remember when I saw House of Cards and with its scathing critique of the US presidency, a US president who is losing the presidency and then declares war. It sounds so familiar. And then I thought, could we have something similar in India? Is it possible to have something that brutally honest? And the question that came in was that, when you're writing a historical novel, is there a political commentary on the contemporary present which is going as a subtext to it?
Every book is political.
Yeah, so could you...
Not a single book. No, but I will not spell it out. That the reader has to find it out.
You would leave it to the reader to find
I have to leave it to the reader because, see, it's a very contentious issue also, but people can read through the lines if they want, and I want them to read through the lines. I want them to find it out in the second reading or third reading. That's why I always, I don't want the book to be read in 2 days, you read the book and leave it. I don't want that. I want people to go back to Asura. I want people to go back to Ajaya. I want people to go back to Bahubali series or Vanara, because they are all contemporary and they will remain, my wish is that they will remain contemporary even after 500 years. Why? Because I am dealing with like any writer worth his salt will be dealing with the human nature, and human nature doesn't change. You write the story of caveman, it doesn't change. You write the story of Mahabharata period, it doesn't change. You write the story of 8th century, 9th century like Bahubali, it doesn't change. You write the story of 5000 AD, science fiction, then also it should not change and it will not change. If it changes, then it doesn't become a novel. Then you are giving it could be like kind of a idealistic poetry and all those things. So that is, again, I am coming to Ramayana and Mahabharata. Ramayana is called Kavya. Traditional, I am not talking about epic. Ramayana is Kavya. Mahabharata is not called Kavya. Ramayana only is called Kavya traditionally because it's poetry, everything is idealistic in that. Mahabharata is Itihasa, it happened. Itihasa has the meaning, it happened like that, it happens like that, it is happening like that, and it will happen like that. That is why Mahabharata is Itihasa, which keeps happening, whereas Ramayana is Kavya. I'm not talking about the Western scholars' definition, they just call everything, grade it as epic. But traditionally, Indians call Ramayana as Kavya and Mahabharata as Itihasa. This is the reason. So, when you are writing, if you are writing poetry, then all this doesn't matter. So, films are a kind of poetry, whereas web series is kind of novels or itihasas.
Interesting.
So, films you need very idealistic. You need Amitabh Bachchan coming and shouting, or you need Rajinikanth coming and vanquishing everyone. It's almost like Ramayana, no? All stories, if you see. Exceptions are there, but generally that is that, no? Vanquishing everything. It is more like, or other kind of films is like Harishchandra, one noble man who struggles. You can see the prototypes in that if you observe carefully. Whereas web series, you cannot run a web series like that with an idealistic men and women. It's very difficult. So you need Breaking Bad kind of heroes. You need like Ajaya. Ajaya or Asura could be a good web series, not a film.
So, but obviously, then you see yourself as writing Itihasa, right? And
novels are generally Itihasa. Novels, not only me.
Yeah, no, I'm just saying that because you're thinking in terms of the Indian terms, not the Western terms. Uh,
Mm.
but is that also the reason why you don't want to write something which is very contemporary, without going into history or
I
mythology,
have
but
been,
very
I have
contemporary
been a,
novel?
I have been a victim of my success actually. Uh, what happens is publishers don't want me to write contemporary novel. I am fighting with many of them. They allow me
You
to
want
write.
to?
Then they don't want to, in the sense they will pay me only 1/10 of what they are paying me for writing this kind of novels. I want to write a lot, and I got so many things. So what I do, many of these things I converted to TV and earn more, much more than this thing. So in TV or Netflix and other places like Sarfarosh, I told no, it's not contemporary exactly, but it is not mythical also. It's 100 years ago. There were 21-6 tried to uh, stop the Afghan in 10,000 Afghan invasion. So that is something which I wrote away from the myth, which is there in Netflix now. Similarly, Jagbandhu thing. So at least I am moving away from,
Very
at least
old.
maybe I am moving away from myth world. It doesn't mean that I won't write it at all. But as an author, I want to experiment everything. I want to do so. One book which is coming out after this, before the third book, is a children's book.
Oh, nice.
So I'm just trying, because it's one of the toughest thing to write for children. So I just want to challenge
Anand, I'm
myself.
actually sitting in a children's library. So what you see
Okay.
behind me are children's books.
I hope next
So,
time you will have my books.
yes, of course. Look
So
forward to
I
that.
am trying to create an enduring children's series. It is based on mythology only, but it's not written in the way how usually they tell mythology. I have written it in a very fun way, which will be suitable for children who are used to watching cartoons. So that was my idea when I created them. So it has to read like a cartoon, that visual should come in their mind. It should not be like the moral lesson what our generation or the generation before that heard. It's so boring. Nowadays, children will not listen to that.
Yeah.
So these things will be coming, and I am writing a thriller. Whether they like it or not, I will publish it. Even I will take a cut in my advance and do it, because I want to prove myself that I can write other things also, because I'm a storyteller. I cannot restrict myself saying that I'm getting opportunities in films and TVs to write any kind of story. So that is a freedom I am getting there. Because they don't go by, it doesn't matter no how many copies I sell and all for them. For them, a brilliant story is a brilliant story, or a good story is a good story. So there, and that's why Adalat and all I wrote, no, like thriller, cozy mystery. So it's not that I not written as a book; it has not come.
So I wanted to ask you about writing about grays in children's books, but I think we'll leave it for another day, because there's one question I definitely want to ask before we open it to the audience, and that is in the current context. Something that I discovered when the pandemic hit us. And I started reading up a bit on pandemics, and I realized that we know very little about the role that disease had in wars, in changing our histories. Like, because in earlier days, very few wars were actually decided, the outcome was decided in frontal combat. It was often sieges, and it was often the outbreak of disease either among the people who were besieged or the besieging army, which determined the course. The Roman Empire fell because of that. So many things in history. And it seems, I also read accounts like of British India, Robert Clive and others, actually talking about the health of their army, because that was very important. Because if your army succumbs to disease, then you lose the war. So given this, that we are going through such a beautiful, not a beautiful time, I mean, very challenging time, but something that has opened our minds to a different kind of experience that we have forgotten. Because in the history that I read, I never read about the role of disease in, or the kind of war history, or even fiction, where we talk about wars and kingdoms. We never really talk about the role of disease. So given that, we are living through this, do you think, or are you thinking about using disease or writing about disease while writing about wars in the future in your historical fiction?
It will be a part of the books I write, this kind of things, because it's a part of those era, this kind of plagues coming, or what do you call smallpox,
Smallpox, cholera, yeah.
plague. So I have already seeded that in the book 2. So in book 3, we'll have this kind of
Oh,
things.
nice.
So it's a part of that, as you said.
So
Like
is it
even the even the entire Renaissance happened because of the Black Plague in Europe, which reduced the
exactly,
population
exactly
and all those
the Black
things.
Death?
Black Death. So that has been a great. So you were telling no history. They don't teach us. History is taught in a very boring way. Most of the world history, you take Western book, it is very Eurocentric, and all Indian history is Delhi centric. Whereas the most important is Delhi centric. It's totally Delhi centric. You don't. Uh, it's ridiculous actually, because you learn about three kings and then you read three lines about all other kingdoms and that's the end of it. A guy who studies history up to 10th will not even hear about the fascinating world it was in India, because they hear only about the Gangetic Plain, which forms around 20-25% of the land. The rest of the entire periphery of India, it's not periphery of India, that's the heart of India. If you see the coastal area from Gujarat to Bengal, the entire coast has more coast and the land in between that. The peninsular India has a much more fascinating history from Gujarat to Bengal, that seaside history, than the landlocked area of Ganges. I'm not saying you should not learn that, but you talk about Lodhis, these are all petty kingdoms if you talk. Uh, but you learn there are kingdoms which went up to Indonesia, which conquered Indonesia, conquered the Kalinga had, Cholas had, Pallavas had. They were had Rajendra Chola, Rajaraja Chola had conquered up to what do you call almost Indonesia, Java, Sumatra. So you don't learn anything about that. Nothing. Like even if I ask somebody what happened to which was the why are we speaking English? I'll ask you a question. Why are we not speaking Dutch? Can you answer that? Dutch
Why
were
are we
one of
not
the
asking?
why
Why are we
are
not
we
talking?
why are we not talking Dutch is because Dutch lost an important war in India and they were
Yeah,
devastated. We don't even learn about it. And Dutch was not a small power. Before British East India Company, Dutch were ruling. Dutch East India Company was ruling half the world. Dutch were
they
ruling
were the biggest maritime
Indonesia,
power.
big maritime power. Dutch were ruling Indonesia. Dutch were ruling parts of Brazil and parts of
Indochina.
Indochina. Everywhere they were ruling, and an Indian king defeated them and finished them off. It took another 100 years for the British to come up. Dutch were thrown out. We don't even learn about it. Marthandavarma in the Battle of Kolachil defeated the Dutch, decisively defeated the Dutch, that they were unable to take India. They tried, the mistake they did was they tried to attack from the sea. And we were a much bigger sea power than the land power. So whoever had come from the western, northwestern frontier have succeeded. Whoever had tried to attack through the sea, no, there was no
Has
invasion through
always
the sea.
lost.
From Gujarat to Bengal, nobody could come through the sea and attack. Only when Britishers were able to take Bengal after the Battle of Plassey, which they won because of Mir Jafar,
Again, yeah.
that it happened. They started getting, once they had that maritime power and Bengal's wealth, then only they were able to conquer. So the Dutch had lost. But how many people know about Marthandavarma? Now he became a bit famous because they found so much wealth hidden in the Padmanabha temple in Trivandrum. But you have not even a single line about this kind of empires. How much we learn about Pala, how much we learn about Gajavadis, how much we learn about the Assam home kings. We are not learning anything. We are not learning about Vijayanagara Empire. We are not learning about Kakatiyas. We are not learning Gautamiputra Shatakarni. So many are there. There is no end to the number of historic figures. Similarly, if you go to world history, what you find, it's everything is Eurocentric. Europe, until they conquered India or colonized India and other countries, America and all, Europe was a backwater. They didn't have even 10% of the population. India, China, and Arabia were the great civilizations at that time. So
And the
Europe,
funny part is that we learned in school that so and so discovered India, as if we didn't know each other. Like America was discovered, as if the American Indians didn't know each other, So we forget actually that it is discovery for the Europeans.
Another funny thing we forget. History is very funny. We think that Europeans came, they defeated us and went. No. 1498, Vasco da Gama came. And Portuguese conquered Brazil. Portuguese couldn't conquer India because they came through the sea. They got a small Goa, small part. Nowhere they were able to establish anything. British East India Company took 270 years to conquer India. So 270, when British had come to India, if somebody says, it's like somebody saying tomorrow, Maldives will conquer India, we will laugh. No, they would have laughed like that. That India will be conquered by the British. So it took 270 years for them. It's not that suddenly they came and we all died down. It happened like you call disease, famine, all these things have worked for it. So but we shrink it. The history, suddenly the impression we get is Britishers came, they are superior, they had guns, they defeated us. No, they lost every war. British, Portuguese, Dutch. They lost every war until Battle of Plassey, if you really see. Every war, and sometimes they lost decisively, like I said, Battle of Colachil and all. No, where they. So half the wealth is taken from Dutch. What you find in Patnava Temple and all.
Yeah. In fact, the other the important thing you mentioned about the kind of history that is written and how a lot of history we don't really get to know. An important part there is a lot of us in India, like definitely people like me in Orissa, we don't see ourselves represented in the Indian history. As if we are invisible. We are invisible in the Indian history.
All of us are invisible. Where do they represent any of the? We get one letter, all combined together. Chera Chola Pandya. Chera Chola Pandya is entire Kerala, Tamil Nadu, part of Karnataka, and part of Andhra Pradesh, plus Sri Lanka. But it's all covered. There were 3 kings. As if there were these are the dynasties went on to thousands of years, 2000 years dynasties. These are not that you have to learn only about dynasties, but this is and you get mention about Lodi, you get mention about all jokers who went and came to Delhi and went back. Delhi was a village. Where is you take the ancient cities of India? Where is Delhi mentioned after Indraprastha, from the Mahabharata period? After that, you don't find Delhi is mentioned at all as a big. It's just a village. Bigger cities were all what we are talking about, no, like Puri, like Kanchipuram, like Hampi, like Musaris, like Paitan, like Prabhasa in Gujarat. These were the big cities of those days. Madurai, Kanauj, Kashi. Where is Delhi mentioned in India? But suddenly the thing became Delhi centric because all our historians have got earlier era historians in the last 40, 50, 60 years. They got free houses in Delhi. So everything was related to Delhi. The entire history was, India was ignored. We don't learn about Palas. We don't learn about, as I said, no, the eastern part of the country, southern part of the country, from Gujarat onwards, it is all gone. Maharashtra also, we just learned Rashtrakutas, 2 lines. Then suddenly you come to Shivaji, and that's all. As if Maharashtra came only from Shivaji. Before that, so many dynasties had ruled. Everything is good. Kannada empires, we don't read at all. They were the greatest builders. Kannada empires, like even Puri, is like Chola Ganga dynasty. No, it's a mix of Chola, Ganga, and Gajapati. It started from there. Gangas. So these are all the temple building started from there. So they only built even the Rani Ka Vav in Gujarat to. These are all done by Kannada kings, Rashtrakutas, and all those things. Where are we learning about them? We don't learn about them.
So that reminds me. I once we were having a conversation. Rajdeep Sardesai was there about news television, and I said actually news television is like a Delhi edition of a newspaper, and history, as you're saying, it seems like a Delhi edition of a history channel.
It's very Delhi centric. It's very Delhi centric history.
So I think we've already gone over an hour. We had a fascinating discussion. I see a lot of comments by people talking about how they've been enjoying this session and how they've been enjoying your novels as well. So we all look forward to more novels by you and more in breaking the mold. In the kind of thrillers that you want to write, children's books, and other kinds of books that we look forward to having you and your books, and of course, Baksi Jagabandhu, not to forget that. So
Yeah.
thank you very much, Anand. Anything
Thank
you
you.
would like to say to the listeners? But just before we end, anything you would like to say? And then I think Rashmi and Debashish, the founders of KLF, will come on for a little announcement.
I will tell what any writer will tell. Please read my books. That's the first thing. Thank you very much for the patient listening. Chaduranka is available now as a book 2. Book 3 will be coming soon. But please read that and read my other books also, and read my other friends' book also. Together we'll have to make it big. It's not just that it's only one author writes, and it's not like that. It has to be. We are the last 10 years. What has happened is we have moved away Indian readers from a lot of us have moved away Indian readers from reading only the Western authors' book. Now Indian authors are being read more Indian authors writing in English are read more than the Western authors, which we all grew reading up. So please continue that, because we are telling our stories. We are telling India's stories, a lot of us. So please continue reading, and definitely please read the Bahubali, both of the books, 1 and 2, and my Asura, Jaya, Vanara, and whatever I am writing. Thank you. And thank you very much, Sujit, for the wonderful session as usual. Again, we may meet soon.
Namaste, sir.
Yeah.
Namaste.
Thank you, sir. It was an excellent session. Thank you, Sujit ji.
Sir, namaste, sir.
Thank you.
Namaste, sir. Thank you.
Sir, actually, we are introducing a new concept in Kalinga Literary Festival, that is Gramin Sahitya. We would like to promote
Okay.
literature in various forms from grassroots level in our KLF. So we would like to launch that concept. You and Sujit will launch this concept today, sir.
Thank you. So wonderful initiative.
This is Gramin Sahitya.
Wonderful initiative. I would like to add that all my Ramayana Mahabharat based stories are not only based on Valmiki Ramayana or Vyas Ramayana. It's all based on this kind of folk tales in various villages. It's a great initiative what you have done.
Yeah, and what I found very interesting is that I believe in Gramin Sahitya, they'll be collecting not only folk tales but also other kinds of folk literature, like folk songs and non-textual things also. So I think it will be a fascinating
That's an
initiative
ocean
collecting-
actually. That's an ocean actually. The folk
Yeah.
songs and folk tales, oral tales, written one will be not even 10% of what we have. I have found so many variations of Ramayana and Mahabharata and tales related to that you cannot even, I don't think you can collect it in a lifetime. Devashish sir, Samantrai sir, you have gone ulta.
Debashish,
Hello.
you're ulta. You'll have to twist yourself.
हाँ.
You have to
Debashish.
twist yourself.
Okay. तो phone call.
Okay, then I think Rashmi, shall we end?
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. I hope you had a great session, and please don't forget to read Chaturanga and the other novels, both by Anand as well as other authors, as Anand mentioned. So bye for now, and bye Anand. Great having you once again.
Thank you, KLF. Thank you, Sujit, and thank you, Rashmi sir. Thank you very much. Bye.